Okay, so today we're going to talk about fiscal policy. Okay, now to be fiscal policy, now remember there are two sets of tools that can be used to try to manage the economy. Okay, and before, say, I don't know, 1950s, 60s, somewhere in there, we didn't really have enough tools in the monetary policy toolbox, okay, to really manage the economy, right? I'm a little shaky on the history here, but it's sometime in there, all right? Before that, if the government wanted to do something to try to manage the economy, what they had to use was fiscal policy tools, okay? Fiscal policy includes two things, and two things only, okay? If it's not one of these two things, it's not fiscal policy, it's probably monetary policy. It's government spending and taxation, okay? Government spending and taxation. Now, if we want to stimulate the economy, right? If we are in a recession, a recessionary gap, that's nice, I should have used that before. There's long run, short run, classical, aggregate demand, okay? We are in this recessionary gap, okay? At something less than full employment, real GDP. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about the classical or the Keynesian, okay? We're back here somewhere with some level of unemployment. Remember, any GDP to the right is more than full employment, meaning overtime. Any to the left is less than full employment, meaning unemployment. So government needs to take action to stimulate the economy, to bring us back to full employment, to close this recessionary or contractionary gap, okay, by stimulating aggregate demand. But they only have two tools, government spending or taxation. So if they want to shift AD out, what can they do? If they can only influence here and here. Well, government can just increase its spending, right? Okay, increase its spending. Theoretically, government spends more. Remember that aggregate demand is a function of spending by consumers, business, government, and outsiders, foreigners on our production, okay? So any increase in spending, no matter what the price level, meaning at every possible price level, if there's an increase in spending, AD should shift out, okay? So government can do one of two things, or both things. Actually, what they tend to do is both. They will increase their spending when we're in a recession, and they will cut our taxes, okay? So that we have more money to spend, right? That's, if we get a tax cut, it's like an increase in our income. So demand curves for most goods and services should shift out, and aggregate demand will move to this new position and bring us back to full employment, okay? There's a lot of problems with fiscal policy. Now, fiscal policy, as we're going to see, by the time we're done this morning, you're going to see that fiscal policy is not the most useful set of tools, okay? There's lots of issues with fiscal policy. But we're stuck with fiscal policy because government taxes us and spends money, right? So the fact that they are taxing us and spending money means that they're having an influence of some kind in the economy, okay? So we're kind of stuck with it. You can't prevent them from spending money, and you can't, and in order to get it, of course, they have to tax us, all right? So there's a couple of problems with this, though. Where does government get its money to spend? Okay? From taxes, right? So if they want to spend $100 more, okay, what do they got to do? They got to tax us, okay? So we have 100 less, right? I think I told you last time that, in fact, increases in government spending are a little bit more effective in terms of moving the economy than cuts in taxes, okay? Remember that? And the reason being is that if government spends, let's say we have a multiplier, let's say we have an MPC, right, we'll say 0.8, which means MPS is 0.2, 2p's have to equal the whole. 1 over MPS means we have a multiplier of 5, right? Okay. Now, if government spends all $100, that'll be spent a total of 5 times in the economy, right? But if they cut our taxes by 100, some of that cut in taxes will save. Okay? So we'll save 20%, we'll spend 80% of that cut in taxes. So we're only going to spend $80. And if that's multiplied, instead of being a total of 100, remember if government spends it, it'll be 500, total of 500 spending. If we get a tax cut, we're going to save part of it, but we'll spend that other 85 times, so total spending in the economy will only go up by 400, okay? So in general, it's more effective for the government to spend the money than it is to cut our taxes. Now, sometimes they cut taxes generally, or they may give you a tax refund, a tax rebate. About, well, how long ago was it? 5, 6 years ago? If you were a two-income family making below a certain amount, okay, they sent you a check for $600, I think. Was that what it was? Something like that. We didn't get that. I think I got $250. I always get screwed. My wife makes too much money. It's true. You know, all of these breaks that they give people for, I don't know, for like fixing up your house energy efficiency or student loan credit, right? I don't get any of those things. I get none. So I guess it's good and bad, right? If she wasn't making so much money, we would get those, but that wouldn't be good either, right? So at any rate, sometimes they send you money back, right? What did we do with that money? Did we spend it? No, most of us did not spend it. We paid off debts. It was like, oh, I got a little bit extra money, I could pay off some debt. So that tax cut, that lump sum payments that they made to people really didn't stimulate the economy very much at all. Rather than going out and spend that money, people paid off bills, okay? That's what I did, I think. I probably did. All right, so the problem is that in order to spend more money, they have to tax us more, okay? Which just reduces our income. So it moves money from one pocket to the other, out of our pockets into the government pocket to be spent. Not going to be very effective. So in order to be effective, fiscal policy means that you have to increase, say, government spending without reducing our spending. How can the government spend more money than it earns? How do we spend more money than we earn? We borrow, right? We borrow the money. And we know what's going to happen, right? When in the market for money, if the government decides they need to go out and borrow money, at every possible, what's the price of money? Interest rate, right? At every possible interest rate, more borrowing means interest rates will rise, okay? So government goes out and wants to spend more money, but to do so, they have to go out and borrow it, okay? And we're going to talk about government borrowing a lot in the next chapters, okay? The way government borrows money is they issue something called a bond, okay? A bond, are you familiar with bonds? Okay. A bond is an IOU. Are you all familiar with IOUs? Okay, good. A lot of people aren't. It's I-O-U. Okay, I owe you money. All right, so that's what a bond is. The way bonds work, and I'll go over this again when we get to that chapter. The way bonds work is the government issues a piece of paper called a financial instrument, all right? And the bond has certain features. I'm getting a little bit off track, but that's okay. We've got plenty of time. All right. The bond has a face value called a par value. Let's say it's $10,000. You buy the bond for 10 grand. Okay. Now, as we're going to see, when the government sells the bond in the marketplace, it'll be at face value. But once those bonds get resold in the marketplace, what you pay for it could be more or less than $10,000. Okay. Depends on what happens to interest rates, which we'll see. Every bond pays an interest rate. What this means is if you loan me $10,000, the government says, I will pay you $700 every single year that I have your bond. Okay? I'll pay you 7% interest, which is the same as $700 every year. At the end of a particular period of time, typically it might be 8 years, okay? I'll pay you your $100,000 back or your $10,000 back, all right? So you lend money to the government for a period of time, they pay you interest on your loan, and then your loan matures and they give you your money back, okay? All right? So that's how the government raises money. And the big buyers of our bonds, any idea who buys the bonds? China. That's right. This is why we owe China $1 trillion plus. dollars because we have borrowed lots of money from them, okay? All right? Okay, so government will go out and issue bonds seeking to borrow money. And when that happens, that demand to borrow money causes interest rates to rise, okay? So government is trying, good morning, government is trying to increase their spending, okay, to shift AD out. But what happens when interest rates rise? What happens to, remember we talked about business investment in Chapter 12, right? That business investment depends upon having a range of opportunities that'll be profitable at current interest rates. And that if interest rates go up, say if interest rates are down here, business will invest that amount of money, okay? But if interest rates rise, fewer projects are profitable. They will invest less. Remember that, okay? That they look into the future and they find that they've got 3 different investment opportunities. This one pays 10%, this one pays 8% profit, and this one's 6% profit, 1 million each. As long as interest rates are below 6%, they'll borrow and invest that money, okay? But if government borrowing causes interest rates to rise now to 7%, that project's no longer profitable. Okay? So as interest rates rise, business investment falls. Okay? What else is going to happen if interest rates rise? Are you going to go out and buy that new car you always wanted? Maybe not. Okay? That new dining room set that your wife is asking for? That new Beamer that your husband wants? Okay? No, you might say, no, interest rates are going to be too high now. I'm not going to go out and borrow. I'm not going to buy that car. Okay? So consumer borrowing and investment will also, consumer borrowing will also fall, okay, because of higher interest rates. Now, I don't think the book actually talks about this, but there's an open economy effect also. Okay? There'll be an effect on exports. The value of the dollar is going to rise. Okay? Why is that? Why will the value of the dollar go up? Well, let's say here in the United States, in the US, you can earn 7% interest on an investment, okay? However, in Mexico Lindo, the beautiful Mexico, okay, you can earn 9%. Where do you want to make your investment? Yes, in Mexico, okay? But in Mexico, they don't take no dollars. You got to have pesos, okay? You got to have pesos. So, to invest in Mexico is the peso market. Investors will buy pesos. Demand for pesos will shift out, and the price of the peso will rise, okay? At the same time, to buy pesos, you have to sell dollars, okay? So the supply of dollars shifts out, and the price of the dollar falls, okay? So we go from $1 equal, I don't know, 200 pesos to $1 equal what? 100 pesos. Is that right? Yeah. The value of the dollar will go down, okay? Now what's going to happen to exports from the United States? In the past, a Mexican, right? Is this right? I got something wrong here. The value of the peso is going to go up, right? So it's going to take fewer pesos to buy a dollar, correct? Yeah. Huh. This isn't right, though. There's something wrong here.
$1 would be 300 pesos.
300 pesos. Okay, that's what it is. I got it going in the wrong direction. Okay. Oops. Thank you, Julio. Okay. All right. So now what's going to happen to exports? They're going to go down. In the past, if Mexican could get $1 worth of our goods for 200 pesos, now it's going to cost them 3. All right? So exports will go down. And what will happen to imports from Mexico? They're going to go up. Okay? So what's going to happen to net exports? They are going to fall. Okay? So as the government tries to move aggregate demand out by increasing its spending, okay, to do so without increasing our taxes, They have to go out and borrow money. That causes interest rates to rise. Consumer borrowing and spending falls. Business investment falls. And higher interest rates in the United States, okay, oh, that's what the problem was. That's what the problem was. I had higher interest rates in Mexico, not in the United States. Should have been the other way around. So I kind of glossed over that. That was incorrect. Okay? It should be this way. Oops. Because of the increase in demand for borrowed money, okay, interest rates rise in the United States relative to other places. So if you're in Mexico, where do you want to invest? In los Estados Unidos, in the United States. But to do so, you have to buy dollars, which causes the price of the dollar to rise, okay? And to do so, you have to sell pesos, which causes the price of the peso to fall, okay? So it takes more pesos to buy a dollar's worth of goods, so exports fall, all right? Okay, that was a little shaky, and you let me get away with it. Okay? All right. Okay? So we get this what's called crowding out effect. Okay? Exports fall. Increases in government spending tend to crowd out, reduce other spending by other groups because of the increase in interest rates. Okay? That's the first policy, the first problem, and it's probably the biggest problem. The second problem is sometimes in order to spend more money, okay, the government spends money in areas that compete with our spending. Okay, that sounds silly, compete with our spending. But what it means, let's say that the government says, well, we're going to spend more money on school lunches, all right? We're going to provide free school lunches to everybody, all students, all right? What does that do to your spending? It reduces it. Now you don't have to send your kid to school with $5 to buy lunch or give them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You don't have to do that anymore. Okay? So we get also crowded out. This is called a direct expenditure offset. That increases in government spending in certain areas reduce our spending. Okay? They reduce our spending. That if they pay for a part of your college education, you pay less. Okay? Their spending goes up, yours goes down. All right? If they increase subsidies to public transportation, your ticket goes down. You pay less. All right? So we might get this direct expenditure offsets for increases in government spending, decreases in consumer spending. Okay? Decreases in consumer spending. What else? Now, there's another reason why aggregate demand, well, at least the book presents one. The reason why aggregate demand might not shift out. This has to do with if government, instead of increasing their spending, okay, decides to get us to spend more by cutting our taxes, okay? All right? Now, we talked about these classical economists, J.B. Say, right? Adam Smith. There's another guy named David Ricardo, early 1800s, just after Smith. And Ricardo, what he said was, you know, if you cut people's taxes, they know that if the government doesn't cut its spending at the same time, government's going to have to borrow that money. And then, in order to pay that money back, in the future, they're going to have to raise our taxes. So our tax cut now will be followed by a tax increase in the future. So instead of spending that tax cut, we'll save it, and then when we get that tax increase, we'll give it back, okay? Do you believe that? I don't believe that at all, okay? I get money in my pocket, I spend it. Right? Okay? We don't say, oh, we might get it. How many people even think of that? Practically nobody, okay? I get a tax cut. Oh, they could raise my taxes in the future. I better save it. Well, I don't think so, right? I could be dead in the future. I'm going to spend it now, okay? So the Ricardian equivalence theorem, I think the book notes that there's very little evidence to actually support its existence. And ever since I read this in this textbook many years ago, I was like, I don't believe that. Nobody's going to save their money because of a future potential tax increase. Not going to happen. There may not necessarily be a tax increase anyway, right? If you stimulate the economy enough, what's going to happen to businesses? They're going to become more profitable, right? More people are going to be working. More people are going to be paying taxes. More money will flow into the government. So they may not have to raise your taxes in the future to pay for a tax cut today, okay? It's one of the reasons I don't believe it, all right? So, Ricardian equivalence theorem, not buying it, all right? Did they mention a couple of other things that might contribute to that? No, I don't think so. Planning for the future, Ricardian, restrained consumption effects of temporary tax change. That has to do with those lump sum payments. You know, they send you it. Bush says we took in too much money, let's send everybody $600. Again, that doesn't represent a permanent increase in our income, so we don't raise our level of spending generally. I mean, we might spend part of that right away. As I said, most people paid off debt with it, okay? Didn't spend it at all, so it's not very effective, okay? All right, so we have indirect crowding out. Okay? Interest rates rise caused by increases in government spending, financed by borrowing, and direct expenditure offsets. If government increases its spending in areas that we normally spend money, it just reduces our spending, which reduces the effectiveness of fiscal policy. Now, something I need to mention, right? The definition of fiscal policy, the discretionary changing of government spending and or taxes in order to achieve specific economic goals, okay? One of the key words is discretionary. That means that the government has to decide what to do, if anything. All right, okay, thank you. Okay. After this talk about 13, we'll go over this test real quick, okay? So the government has to decide what to do, if anything. That's why it is discretionary. It just doesn't happen automatically. As we're going to see, there are some fiscal policy tools that are automatic in nature, meaning no action is necessary by anybody for them to work, okay? But for the most part, if we find out we're in a recession, government has to decide, should we do something or not? And if we do something, what do we do? Do we increase our spending, or do we cut taxes, or do we do some of both? All right? Now, one of the problems with fiscal policy, another problem with fiscal policy, is that it is, how many people, who makes fiscal policy? Do you know? Who decides taxation and government spending? Anybody know who does that here in this country? Congress, precisely right. I mean, the president presents a budget, whatever, all right? Congress has its own budget, and eventually they come to an agreement. Congress consists of the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, right? How many people in the Senate? 100, okay? 2 from each state, okay? So you have 100 senators. And how many Congress people are there? Do you know? That sounds right, Israel. That sounds right. Around 435, 400 and something, okay? Bunch of morons, if ever there were any. Okay? 435 congressmen. Amazing how stupid some of these people are. Okay? Anyway, so these people have to come to an agreement on what to do, right? Should we increase government spending, or should we cut taxes? Well, let's increase government spending. What are we going to spend it on? Well, the senator from Massachusetts gets up, our roads and bridges stink. We need more money on infrastructure. The guy from Michigan gets up and says, listen, we got huge unemployment there. We need to spend money on retraining and rebuilding opportunities. And the guy from California says, no, we got lots of floods, we got forest fires, we need some real help in that area, okay? So they got to argue about it, right? They got to decide what they're going to spend the money on, where they're going to spend it, all right? Everybody twists arms, calls in favors, promises, all that stuff, right? How long do you think it takes 535 people to come to an agreement? Forever, okay? Forever, all right? So the first problem is, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about monetary policy or fiscal policy, okay? The first problem is it takes us a while to figure out we have a problem, okay? You know what? We didn't even talk about this, but a recession, in order to be considered a recession, we have to have 2 straight quarters of flat or declining economic activity. So we need 6 months, okay? It has to be 6 months long before we are officially in a recession and government might want to take some action. How long does it take us to figure out that we're in a recession? Well, the first month after, let's say this is, we'll say it's just January, all right? This is the end of January. Governments can, well, the first problem is, okay, is that we're here, the economy has gone up, and now it's going down. All right, 3 months. There's 3 month span from here to here. Are we in a recession? We don't know, okay, because it has to be 6 months long. Well, the next month it goes up a little bit. Not a recession. Then it goes down, and then it stays down. Okay, really, we started the problem here, but we had this little glitch, and 3, 6, 9 months later, we're definitely in a recession. 9 months later. But what they do is they collect statistics on this period here, and a month later they publish them. But they're almost always way off. Okay? The first month's figures are almost way off, always. The second month later, now they begin to narrow it down. And it isn't until 3 months later, typically, that they say this is the real exact number. Okay? Because the first time we went through, we weren't really sure. The second time, we left these out. We added these in twice. We got to readjust, blah, blah, blah. All right? So it may take them, in fact, we found out not this last recession, but the one before that, it started in March, and we didn't find out that we were in a recession until the following September, okay? So it takes like 3 to 6 months to figure out we've got a problem in the economy that needs to be addressed, and that's true if we're talking about inflation also, okay? So there's a time lag, okay, called the recognition time lag. Okay? And who knows, 6 months maybe, okay? Maybe longer before we figure out we have a problem. Now, it doesn't matter whether we're talking fiscal policy or monetary policy. It takes us a fairly long time to figure out we've got an issue because it has to be a trend, right? The economy's going up and down like that, we don't know. But if it goes down and down and down, now we know. Now, the second problem comes into play here. Once we decide, yeah, we got a problem, we have to decide what we're going to do about it, if anything. And it takes these people, 535 people, some time to figure out what to do, okay? So we have what's called an action time lag. Okay? Who knows? 3, 6 months? Who knows? Now, let's say that Congress decides that the guy from Massachusetts is right, the nation's infrastructure is falling apart, we really need to reinvest in our roads and highways, okay? Do you know who dreamed up, who thought up, invented, I suppose, modern highway systems? You know who invented that? No? Hitler. Yes, so he could get military equipment from one side of the country to the other very quickly. Okay, built these autobahns. Anybody ever been on an autobahn? Yeah, have you? Yeah, boy, do they drive fast on the autobahn. Right? I rented a Mercedes-Benz. I got a free trip to Europe from Lufthansa Airlines. Okay, free airfare to Munich for my wife and myself because I did a lot of business with them a long time ago. And I rented a Mercedes-Benz. And we were driving in Austria on this long straightaway, and I had the car up, I think it was 117 miles an hour. I was cruising, and I said to my wife, "Oh, look at those beautiful mountains." She goes, "What mountains?" Right? Scared to death. But I think we were doing 95 miles an hour down the Autobahn somewhere in Germany. And zoom, 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 these motorcycles go 120 miles an hour, like just blew by us like we were doing nothing, right? It was cool. Anyway, there is no speed limit. None. Yep. And parts of it, yeah. I'm not sure about most of it, but on good parts of it, there's no speed limit at all. Yeah. And when there's an accident, oh man, it is really, really bad accident. You know, at those speeds, usually people don't survive, eh? Anyway, that was cool. Anyway, let's say the government decides they're going to improve roads, okay? So they call up Deval Patrick and they say, good news, Deval. We're going to give Massachusetts $800 million to repair roads and bridges. Deval says that's great. So what happens next? Now they got to send somebody out to figure out what roads and bridges should be done, right? What's the priority? Then they figure that out. And then what do? Now they've got to, because it's public money, it's got to be put out to public bidding, okay? So you have to say, anybody interested in fixing these bridges, these roads? All these companies submit bids. And then what happens? They get selected. Somebody gets selected to repair the bridge up here in Charlestown, okay? Now what do? They got to go out and hire people, right? And get all the materials and all that type of thing. But once they get started repairing the bridge, man, it goes like that, right? Once they start fixing a road, it takes about a week. No, it takes forever, right? It takes them years to do anything like that. So what happens? That money doesn't get spent for 6 months more, okay? This is called the effect, time lag. Okay? Time lag, not time, time lag, okay? So by the time the money is spent in the economy, we may no longer have this problem anymore, okay? It was a year ago that something was going on. So a year ago, yeah, we were back here in a recession, okay? Government increases its spending, but by that time, the economies of Europe and Asia and Latin America have all recovered. They're now buying more and more of our exports. Aggregate demand has shifted out already. And now what happens? That money now gets spent in the economy. So what happens now? We end up with an inflation problem instead of an unemployment problem, okay? One of the other problems with fiscal policy is that the time lags can be so long that by the time the fiscal policy is implemented, instead of correcting one problem, it causes the opposite, okay? That it may actually end up destabilizing the economy, pushing it into inflation, or if we're talking about worried about inflation, right? What's going to happen next, by the way? If we are here and aggregate demand shifts out to here, where will we end up? Remember what's going to happen next? Costs are going to rise. Yes, once we've gone through the overtime business and the costs rise, then SRAS shifts in because of higher costs, right? I didn't do that wrong, but whatever. We'd be up here. Okay? And we just end up with more inflation, okay? So when we are out here in an expansionary gap, fiscal policy wants to be contractionary, not expansionary, right? We want to shift aggregate demand back in, all right, to keep us from going through this inflationary spiral. Now, the truth of the matter is they rarely actually shift AD in, okay? What's happening when we're out here? Okay? We're out here, and if we think about it, what we're really saying is that we want to shift aggregate demand back in, okay? Shift it back in so that we don't end up back up here, that we end up here, all right? That we don't get these two hits of inflation. But that isn't really what happens. They don't really shift aggregate demand in. What they're trying to do is keep aggregate demand from shifting out anymore and allow aggregate supply to catch up with it, okay? That keep it from shifting out, keep more inflation from happening, hold it steady while aggregate supply shifts out, okay? So that we don't get that inflation. That's really what's happening. But we're going to talk about it in terms of reducing aggregate demand by doing the opposite that you would do to stimulate it. You reduce government spending, right? If you're out here, then government will say, well, we need to cut our spending. That will calm down the economy. keep us from shifting out more, or we can raise taxes on consumers, and that will reduce their spending, all right, or calm it down. But this is the way we're going to talk about it, that when we're up here, we want to move back here. If we're back here with unemployment, now that's for sure, we want to shift AD out. But government doesn't really take actions to try to reduce aggregate demand, generally speaking, okay? They just try to keep it from expanding more, calm the economy down, cool it down, okay? So those are the problems with fiscal policy. Okay? We got indirect crowding out. If government cuts our taxes, they have to cut their spending or borrow money. If they increase their spending, they've either increased our taxes or borrow it. So to avoid reducing our spending, if they increase theirs, they go out and borrow money, causes interest rates to rise, reduces business investment, reduces consumer borrowing and spending. Higher interest rates attract more investment to the United States. People buy up dollars, raising the price of the dollar causes exports to fall, okay? Indirect crowding out. And then we have direct expenditure offsets. If government increases its spending in areas that we normally spend money, their increase, our decrease. They buy it, we don't have to, okay? And then finally, these fiscal time lags, right? These recognition, not so bad. Here's the big difference, by the way, between fiscal policy. Here's fiscal policy, okay? We've got your recognition time lag, your action time lag, and your effect time lag. That's fiscal policy. In monetary policy, we still have that long recognition, but the action time lag, very short. The effect time lag may be just as long, okay, as in fiscal policy, depending upon what they're doing. I don't think so. I think it's a little bit quicker. But it's this piece here, the action time lag, is where the big time savings come in, okay? How many people do we say made fiscal policy? 535? How many people make monetary policy? Any idea? Yeah, one guy. You know what his name is? Bernanke, yeah. Now, technically, there are 7 people making monetary policy, but the head of the totem pole, Mr. Bernanke, pretty much gets his way. If he thinks we should stimulate the economy, they go along with it, generally speaking, okay? If he thinks we need to calm it down, then they go along with that typically, all right? So really, it's what Bernanke decides should be done. And when they recognize they have a problem, they have a meeting and they take action immediately, okay? They take action immediately. They don't have to discuss it to the same extent, okay? As we're going to see, monetary policy really has very few, if any, of the problems that fiscal policy has. There's no crowding out effect. It doesn't fit monetary policy. Trying to expand the economy doesn't cause the value of the dollar to rise and reduce exports. Lowers interest rates, so just the opposite happens, okay? And the time lag is much shorter because it doesn't take 535 people to come to an agreement on something, all right? Okay. Now, during abnormal times, fiscal policy can be effective, okay? Let's say that we are on the Keynesian short-run aggregate supply curve, okay? And let's say we're way back here, all right? That full employment, real GDP is way out here, right? And we're way back here. We're in a depression. It's the 1930s. Yeah. Government decides it's going to go out and spend more money, okay? Which we know is going to cause interest rates to go up. Will that reduce consumer borrowing and spending? If you are really worried about your job, are you going to go out and borrow money? If you've lost your job, are you going to go out and borrow money and buy a new car? No. So government spending, will that really reduce consumer borrowing and spending if we're in a depression? Not very much. Okay, interest rates go up, doesn't matter. I'm not buying nothing anyway. Business, when we're in a depression, is business investing in new plants and equipment? Hell no. So they're not buying anything anyway. Okay? So when we have these really bad times, fiscal policy can be effective because we don't get this indirect crowding out, because business isn't investing anything anyway, and consumers aren't buying new cars or houses or anything else, okay? But during normal times, fiscal policy is not very effective, as for the reasons that we've seen. What is more effective during during normal periods, when we are, say, close to full employment, right? We are in this range here, somewhere close by to full employment level, normal, then automatic stabilizers built into the economy that function automatically tend to keep us within this range, okay? Keep us close to normal full employment. Now, we have two, only two. In the real world, there's only two automatic fiscal stabilizers. Our federal income tax system, our progressive income tax system, and unemployment compensation, okay? Let's say that we're in equilibrium here, and the Europeans go into recession, exports fall, aggregate demand shifts in. Now we are here, okay? And let's say I get laid off. I'm one of the people that becomes unemployed, okay? Again, right? And I was taking home $1,000 a week, all right? And I lose my job. Is AD going to shift in by the equivalent of $1,000 if I lose my job? No. Why not? Yes, I'm going to get unemployment. The government's going to send me money. So let's say they send me $500 a week. So my spending only drops by $500. AD only shifts in that far, not that far, okay? Because government will make up some of my loss of income by sending me money, right? Did I tell you how has anybody collected unemployment recently? Yeah? What do they pay now? Do you know? Maximum possible? 900? 900 what? 900 every 2 weeks. Well, that's not too bad. 900 every 2 weeks. Well, I was unemployed in 1981. I collected. It was a long time ago now. 1981, 30 years ago. You know how much I got? I got $400 every 2 weeks. No, I forgot. Because I had a child, I got $412 every 2 weeks. Imagine that, $6 a week for my kid. And not only that, but I had to report to the unemployment office here in Boston every 2 weeks. I had to physically come here. You don't have to do that anymore. I had to do that. And fill out a paper saying I applied for jobs or I looked for jobs at the following places, right? So what do? I open up the phone book. Yeah, I applied there. I applied there. I didn't apply anywhere. There weren't any jobs out there, right? I was a discouraged worker. I was, as a matter of fact. The day, actually, I think it was like 2 days before I saw a job in the newspaper that I applied for, I decided I'd given up. It's like, I've asked everybody I know. I've looked in every paper. I've done everything I could possibly think of. I've sent resumes to every company I could possibly imagine to send it to, okay? I got great responses. Oh, what a great resume. Love to hire you. We're going out of business. Right? Love to hire you, but we're laying people off. All right? At any rate. Okay, so that's one of them. That's one of them. So that when we lose our jobs, aggregate demand doesn't shift in by as much as it would, okay? Because now government makes up some of our spending by sending us money. What else happens? What when I get my job back? Does my spending now go up by $1,000 a week? Now that I've got my $1,000 a week job back? No. My spending only goes up by $500 because now government stops sending me those $500 a week checks, right? Or whatever they would be, okay? So AD doesn't shift out by as much. And then as our incomes increase and AD begins to shift out even more, what happens to that portion of our income that we get to spend? It shrinks because now we're in a higher tax bracket and government increases the percentage of our income that they take away from us. So even though my salary went up by $500, I don't get, when I was making $1,000, maybe I was taking home $800, okay? I get a raise to $1,500, my pay doesn't go up by $400 more, it only goes up by $300 to $1,100 because now government is taking more of my money, all right? So what this does is keep AD from shifting out by as much as it would. The progressive tax system means that as our incomes rise, we get to keep less of it as a percentage. Government takes more away from us, all right? So that keeps AD from shifting out. And likewise, as our incomes fall because we're in a recession, government reduces that portion of our income that they take away. So we get to keep more of our reduced take-home. So our aggregate demand doesn't shift in by as much. All right with that, you guys? Okay. So during normal times, fiscal policy, not very effective. Automatic stabilizers tend to do a much better job, and the reason why they're automatic is that nobody has to make a decision. They just happen automatically. We begin losing our jobs, government starts pumping money into our pockets, okay? We get a big raise, government says, well, you can keep less of it, okay? All right. Anything else that we need to talk about in this chapter? This is chapter 13. The automatic stabilizers. I think there's one thing. Fiscal policy. Oh yeah, one last thing. I think I mentioned this before, right? The soothing effect of Keynesian fiscal policy. Right? I mean, we're here, for whatever reason, AD shifts in, people get laid off. Okay? Now what happens? We begin to worry about the future. We say, well, we better cut back our spending, save some money. What happens? People get laid off. And now we get really nervous. Okay? Now I'm really worried. I'm not buying nothing anymore. AD shifts in. Now we're in deep, deep trouble. Okay? Well, that doesn't happen. We don't panic. Okay? Because we know that government will take action to keep aggregate demand from shifting in, to make sure that I can still have money to spend, that the economy is not going to go totally down the tubes, right? That they will bail out the big banks. Too big to fail, right? Like I told you guys, I think all of those people, half of them should be in prison, right? Bankers should generally be jailed, along with lawyers. Don't watch Park Avenue? No? Oh, yeah. You know what you call 10,000 lawyers at the bottom of the sea? A good start. You know why sharks don't eat lawyers? Professional courtesy. What's the difference between a skunk and a lawyer? The skid marks leading up to the skunk. Lots of terrible jokes like that about lawyers. I think they say for every 1,000 lawyers that graduate, GDP goes down $1 million. All right, you guys?
There's no difference between crowding out effect and indirect crowding out.
No, I don't think so. Unless they're referring it to something else. Indirect. Yeah, the crowding out effect is, the indirect crowding out business. Okay. Well, actually, they probably consider the direct expenditure offsets also as part of crowding out, right? They spend it, so we don't. All right?